Long before Texas became part of the United States, it was a vast and untamed frontier. Endless grasslands stretched beyond the horizon, wild rivers carved through the wilderness, and only a handful of settlements interrupted the open landscape. For centuries, this land belonged to Spain. Spanish missionaries built churches and missions across Texas, hoping to spread their faith and strengthen Spain's presence in North America. One of those missions would later become famous around the world, the Alamo. At first, it was never meant to be a fortress. It was simply a place of worship, surrounded by thick stone walls and quiet courtyards. Everything changed in 1821. After years of fighting, Mexico won its independence from Spain. Texas became part of the new nation of Mexico, and its government hoped to develop the nearly empty northern frontier. To attract settlers, Mexico encouraged families from the United States to move into Texas. Leading many of these settlers was Stephen F. Austin. Hundreds of families crossed the frontier with wagons, livestock, and dreams of a better future. They cleared forests, built farms, opened businesses, and transformed the empty frontier into growing communities. Within only a few years, Texas changed dramatically. New towns appeared across the countryside, trade expanded, the population grew rapidly, but success also created new problems. Most American settlers spoke English. Most Mexican officials spoke Spanish. They followed different laws, different traditions, and different political ideas. The cultural divide grew deeper every year. Then the Mexican government introduced new policies that many settlers strongly opposed. Among them were restrictions affecting immigration and slavery, along with tighter control over local government. Tension spread across Texas. Meetings became arguments. Arguments became protests. Many settlers believed that Mexico was slowly taking away the freedoms they had been promised. Meanwhile, Mexico itself was changing. A military leader named Antonio López de Santa Anna rose to power. At first, many Texans believed he would defend the Mexican Constitution. Instead, Santa Anna dissolved much of the federal system and concentrated power in the central government. For many Texans, this was the final warning. Resistance quickly turned into open rebellion. In October of 1835, Texan volunteers faced Mexican soldiers at the small town of Gonzales. The Mexican army demanded the return of a small cannon. The Texans refused. Instead, they raised a simple flag carrying a bold message: "Come and take it." Shots were fired. Although the battle was small, its meaning was enormous. The Texas Revolution had officially begun. News spread rapidly across the frontier. Volunteers left their farms, businesses, and families. Some had military experience. Many did not. But nearly all believed they were fighting for the future of Texas. Among those answering the call were Lieutenant Colonel William Barrett Travis, a young officer determined to defend Texas at any cost, and the legendary frontiersman Jim Bowie, already famous for his courage and his massive Bowie knife. Soon, both men arrived at the old Spanish mission, known as the Alamo. The stone walls were strong, but the fortress was never designed to withstand a massive army. Still, the defenders refused to abandon it. Cannons were positioned along the walls. Supplies were gathered. Volunteers prepared for the battle they knew was coming. Far beyond the horizon, Santa Anna had already begun marching north with thousands of experienced Mexican soldiers. The defenders of the Alamo had no way of knowing that within days they would become part of one of the most legendary stories in American history. As February 1836 drew to a close, the quiet plains surrounding San Antonio suddenly came alive with movement. From the watchtowers of the Alamo, Texan sentries spotted long columns of soldiers marching across the horizon. There was no doubt who they were. General Antonio López de Santa Anna had arrived. Behind him marched nearly 2,000 experienced Mexican troops, supported by cavalry, artillery, and supply wagons. Their colorful battle flags stretched across the Texas prairie as drums echoed through the morning air. Inside the Alamo, only around 200 defenders prepared to face them. The odds were overwhelming. Santa Anna believed the siege would end quickly. Confident in his superior numbers, he sent a formal demand for unconditional surrender. A messenger carrying a white flag approached the fortress. Silence filled the courtyard as William Barrett Travis read the message aloud. The defenders understood exactly what surrender meant. Their answer came without hesitation. A cannon roared from the walls of the Alamo. Its thunder echoed across the battlefield. The siege had begun. Day after day, Mexican artillery pounded the old mission. Heavy cannonballs smashed into the ancient stone walls. Dust filled the air. Pieces of rock crashed into the courtyard. Yet every time the walls were damaged, the defenders worked through the night to repair them. Life inside the Alamo became increasingly difficult. Food was carefully rationed. Every bullet counted. The wounded were treated with whatever medicine remained. Women prepared meals over small fires, while children tried to ignore the constant sound of explosions outside. Even under relentless bombardment, morale remained surprisingly strong. One man who inspired everyone was Davy Crockett. Already famous throughout America as a frontiersman, hunter, and former congressman from Tennessee, Crockett spent his days encouraging the defenders. He joked with the younger volunteers. He stood watch along the walls. And when cannon fire intensified, he was often among the first to respond. Meanwhile, Jim Bowie became seriously ill. Confined to his bed by disease, he could no longer patrol the walls. But despite his condition, Bowie continued advising the officers and refused every suggestion that he should leave the fortress. Outside, Santa Anna tightened the siege. More artillery arrived. More soldiers surrounded the mission. No one entered, no one escaped. Inside the Alamo, William Barrett Travis realized that help might never come. On February 24th, he sat beneath the light of a single candle and wrote one of the most famous letters in American history. He addressed it simply, "To the people of Texas and all Americans in the world." In it, Travis described the desperate situation inside the Alamo. He declared that the fortress was surrounded by thousands of enemy soldiers. He promised that he would never surrender, and he ended with words that would echo through history: victory or death. Brave couriers slipped through the Mexican lines carrying copies of the letter across Texas. They rode through darkness, avoiding enemy patrols and risking capture every mile. The message spread quickly. Volunteers wanted to help, but distance, poor roads, and the speed of Santa Anna's advance made large-scale reinforcements almost impossible. Only a handful of additional defenders managed to reach the Alamo. It was nowhere near enough. Inside the fortress, the commanders gathered one final time. William Travis, Jim Bowie, Davy Crockett, and the other officers carefully reviewed every defensive position. Every cannon was assigned. Every wall was manned. Every soldier knew where he would stand when the attack finally came. That evening, many defenders quietly wrote farewell letters to their families. Some prayed, some cleaned their weapons one last time. Others simply sat in silence, listening to the distant sounds of the Mexican camp. Across the battlefield, Santa Anna studied the fortress beneath the glow of hundreds of campfires. His preparations were complete. Before another sunrise, he intended to end the siege forever. Inside the Alamo, the defenders also knew the truth. Morning was coming, and with it, their greatest test. The night of March 5th, 1836, was strangely quiet. Inside the Alamo, the defenders stood along the walls beneath a sky filled with stars. The constant cannon fire had slowed, replaced by an eerie silence that made the coming battle feel even more certain. No one knew exactly when the attack would begin, but everyone knew it was coming. Some soldiers sat beside small lanterns, cleaning their muskets one final time. Others quietly prayed. A few unfolded letters from home and read them again, knowing they might never see their families. William Barrett Travis walked the walls of the fortress, speaking calmly to each defender. There were no promises of rescue, no promises of victory. Only one promise remained, that they would stand together until the very end. Before sunrise on March the 6th, a thick layer of fog covered the Texas prairie. The defenders loaded their cannons. Powder horns were filled. Muskets were checked one last time. Then, a bugle shattered the silence. Moments later, thousands of Mexican soldiers surged forward from every direction. Drums thundered across the battlefield. Officers raised their swords. Battle flags pushed through the morning mist. The final assault had begun. From the Alamo's walls, the defenders unleashed devastating cannon fire. Heavy grape shot tore through the advancing ranks. Musket volleys echoed across the fortress. For a moment, it seemed the attack might fail. But Santa Anna had sent wave after wave of fresh soldiers. Every time one column fell back, another moved forward. Ladders slammed against the stone walls. Texan defenders pushed them away. Some attackers fell. Others climbed higher. The smoke grew so thick that soldiers could barely see one another. Explosions shook the old mission. Stone walls cracked beneath relentless artillery. Then, after hours of desperate fighting, Mexican troops finally forced their way through damaged sections of the defenses. The battle moved inside the fortress itself. Every courtyard, every hallway, every room became a battlefield. Hand-to-hand combat erupted. Bayonets clashed. Rifle butts became clubs. Knives flashed through the smoke. William Barrett Travis continued directing the defense until he was struck down during the fighting. Even after their commander fell, the defenders refused to surrender. Inside one of the rooms, Jim Bowie remained confined to his bed by illness. Unable to stand, he still refused to give up. As Mexican soldiers entered, Bowie made his final stand from the very place where he lay. Elsewhere, Davy Crockett and a small group of volunteers fought with extraordinary determination. Outnumbered and surrounded, they continued resisting as long as they possibly could. One by one, the defensive positions fell. The chapel became the last refuge. The remaining defenders gathered behind makeshift barricades, firing their final rounds before the fighting closed in around them. Then, the guns fell silent. After nearly 90 minutes of brutal combat, the Battle of the Alamo was over. The fortress had fallen. Smoke drifted slowly above the shattered stone walls. Broken cannons stood motionless. Discarded weapons lay scattered across the courtyard. General Santa Anna rode through the captured mission, surveying the terrible cost of his victory. Militarily, he had succeeded. The Alamo was his. But the price had been far greater than he had expected. As the smoke cleared beneath the rising Texas sun, the fortress stood in silence. What had happened inside those walls would soon become far more powerful than any battlefield victory, because the story of the Alamo was only beginning. Although the defenders of the Alamo had been defeated, their sacrifice sent shockwaves across Texas. The women, children, and other non-combatant survivors who were spared left the ruined mission carrying heartbreaking stories of what had happened inside its walls. As they traveled from town to town, the news spread with incredible speed. The Alamo had fallen. Nearly every defender was dead. Across the Texas frontier, families gathered in silence as riders delivered the terrible message. Many removed their hats. Others wept openly. But alongside the grief came something else: determination. The sacrifice of the Alamo defenders ignited a new spirit across Texas. Young volunteers left their homes. Veterans returned to the fight. Entire communities united behind a single cry. Remember the Alamo! Those 3 words became far more than a slogan. They became a promise. General Sam Houston understood that another reckless battle would only lead to more tragedy. Instead, he carefully rebuilt the Texan army. His soldiers trained harder. They learned discipline. They waited patiently for the right opportunity. Meanwhile, Santa Anna believed the rebellion had nearly been crushed. Confident after his victory at the Alamo, he divided his forces and pushed deeper into Texas. It was a decision that would change everything. In April of 1836, Houston learned that Santa Anna's army had stopped near the San Jacinto River. The moment he had been waiting for had finally arrived. On the afternoon of April 21st, the Texan army advanced. The soldiers moved quickly across the open prairie. As they charged forward, one voice echoed across the battlefield. "Remember the Alamo!" Hundreds of others answered. The surprise attack caught the Mexican army completely unprepared. Within minutes, their defensive lines collapsed. Many soldiers fled. Others surrendered. The battle lasted only about 18 minutes, making it one of the shortest decisive battles in American history. The victory was complete. The following day, General Santa Anna was captured while trying to escape. Facing defeat, he agreed to orders that led to the withdrawal of Mexican forces from Texas. Although political disputes continued for years, the revolution had effectively been won. Texas had secured its independence. Soon afterward, the Republic of Texas was established. For nearly a decade, it stood as an independent nation before joining the United States in 1845. Yet the greatest legacy of the Alamo was never measured by territory or politics. It was measured by memory. Families returned to the old mission to honor those who had fallen. Veterans told the story to their children and grandchildren. Generation after generation preserved the names of William Barrett Travis, Jim Bowie, Davy Crockett, and the many other defenders who chose to stand together against overwhelming odds. Over time, the Alamo became one of the most recognized historic sites in America. Millions of visitors have walked through its gates, standing where ordinary men made an extraordinary choice. Their stand did not save the Alamo, but it inspired a movement that changed the future of Texas forever. Today, the weathered stone walls still stand in the heart of San Antonio. They remind us that history is not always written by the largest armies. Sometimes, it is written by a small group of people who refuse to surrender. The Battle of the Alamo lasted less than 2 weeks. Its final assault lasted less than 2 hours. Yet its legacy has endured for nearly 2 centuries. Courage, sacrifice, hope. These are the ideals that continue to echo through the story of the Alamo. And every time those words are spoken, remember the Alamo. The legacy of those defenders lives on.